The NBA playoffs are officially upon us, and this is probably my favorite time of year as a basketball fan. Let's be real, between June of 2024 and June of 2025, not much changes in the personal life of an individual basketball player. But on the other hand, a player's legacy and reputation can completely change in that small window of time, simply because the playoffs exist, and because of how much value we place on the postseason. This is the time of year where player legacies are defined. These are the moments that people will remember for decades to come. Today, I'm looking at the superstar players in the playoffs and breaking down what winning an NBA championship would mean for their legacies. Now let me make this clear, not every star player is getting mentioned, but just the superstars with the most realistic chance of winning a championship. For example, most guys in the play-in tournament won't get mentioned, but I may make a couple exceptions. Let's start off in the Eastern Conference with Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. This guy is a real interesting one because he didn't receive full credit that a superstar player typically does when they win their first championship. A big part of that is because of how stacked that Boston roster is, and their success was viewed as a very collective effort, rather than a star player asserting his will. He also didn't excel in the NBA Finals, as the Finals MVP award was given to his co-star Jaylen Brown. Because of this, I still think he has a lot to prove if he wants to take his legacy to the next level. For a while, Tatum has kind of been viewed as a Tier 2 superstar. The Tier 1s are the regular MVP candidates, like Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, and Giannis. A second straight championship for Tatum would validate his legacy, and would certainly usher him into that Tier 1 category. It wouldn't earn him the title of the best player in the league, but I do think it would make people confident that he at least belongs in that conversation. With that being said, he still has to play well in order to earn that type of respect. If he has a mediocre playoffs and is once again looking on to a teammate who wins the Finals MVP, then I think his reputation will take an interesting turn, as he would be viewed and criticized as a lucky star, who didn't earn his standing and who just conveniently plays in an ideal situation. Now let's look at Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers. As things currently stand, Mitchell is on his way to being one of those players who's barely talked about 30 years from now. Like, he was great, but without the MVPs and without the championships, he'll pretty much only be remembered and honored by the most hardcore basketball fans. I'm talking about guys like Sidney Moncrief, Alex English, and Adrian Dantley of the 1980s. Guys who are on that trajectory today are Karl Anthony Towns, Paul George, and Donovan Mitchell. With that being said, everything changes with an NBA championship. One of the benefits of winning a title in Cleveland is the fact that he would become an instant legend within that city. Right now, they only have superstars like LeBron James and Kyrie Irving in their history to celebrate as champions. But if Mitchell wins, he joins that very exclusive club. He'll be immortalized within basketball lore as a Cleveland Cavalier, and he will enable that franchise to take itself more seriously, rather than being seen as an organization who was just lucky to win a ring with LeBron. Basically, if Mitchell leads his team to the Larry O'Brien Trophy, then I think you might as well book his future statue outside of Rocket Arena. It won't usher him into the conversation of the best players in the league today, because he simply doesn't have the year-to-year numbers to justify that. But as far as how he'll be remembered, it will mean he's relevant in basketball conversations for decades to come. Next up is Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks. In a way that's similar to Donovan Mitchell, Brunson would get a massive boost in legacy thanks to the organization he plays for. The New York Knicks haven't won an NBA championship since 1973. Most of their fans probably weren't even alive to experience that. I would say that the Big Apple is starving for an NBA championship. But honestly, I think that was the case 1 or 2 decades ago. But at this point, I think most of the feeling in that city has turned into apathy. Like, the fan base will believe it when they see it. Madison Square Garden is the mecca of basketball, and if Brunson wins a championship in that building, accomplishing something that even Patrick Ewing and Carmelo Anthony couldn't do, then he will be viewed as a godlike figure in that city. The adoration and love for this star will be something that very few players have ever experienced. Sure, he'll be within the franchise's lore with Knicks legends like Willis Reed and Walt Frazier, but to young New York fans who never experienced that, he'll be in a class of his own. Now we got Tyrese Halliburton of the Indiana Pacers, and this is another interesting case. He's currently only 25 years old, and last year, he was getting hyped to such an insane extent that he was even receiving comparisons to Magic Johnson. Well, that hype basically completely died off when he got off to a slow start this season, as basically all of his averages and efficiency numbers were down. But he and his Pacers eventually did find their stride, and had a stronger second half of the season. So his perception and reputation has been on a bit of a roller coaster lately. Of course, and naturally peaks to an all-time high if he leads them to an NBA championship. He won't receive as much credit as many other players on this list, considering the fact that Tyrese isn't even the team's leading scorer, which is Pascal Siakam. And the Pacers usually get wins by committee, as they had 7 players this season who averaged double-digit scoring. If the Pacers win the championship, it will mean a ton, since it will be their only title since their ABA days in the 70s. But if that was to happen, I think they'll be somewhat seen as the modern-day version of the 2004 Pistons. Great overall talent and did it as a group, but instead of elite defense, it will be because of their solid offense. So yeah, Tyrese has a lot to gain, but because of the structure of his team, I think it's a lot less to gain than many of the other players in this video. Next, we're looking at Giannis of the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's be real, it's a surprise that the Bucks are even in this position. After the highly scrutinized hirings of Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham, the Bucks got off to a terrible 2-7 start to the regular season, and many people expected their year to end up the way Philly's did. With that being said, Giannis went beast mode as he was determined to get his team into the dance. Then Damian Lillard went down with a regular season-ending injury in mid-March. Regardless, Giannis carried and had his team on an 8-game winning streak heading into these playoffs. So as you can tell, there's already some 2018 LeBron vibes coming from the Greek Freak this season. It's still unclear whether or not Lillard will be back at some point in the playoffs. But regardless, if Giannis somehow leads his team to another championship, regardless of their injuries, chemistry issues, and coaching concerns, then it will take him to an insane stratosphere. He's already an NBA champion, a 2-time MVP, and a Defensive Player of the Year winner. He also won the Finals MVP in 2021 with some of the greatest Finals performances in NBA history. If he wins his second ring under these circumstances, then he's suddenly in the conversation of the top 10 greatest players of all time. Seriously, picture his resume then against a player like Hakeem Olajuwon, and the comparison is a lot more competitive than you might have thought. It's also worth noting that Giannis has been a bit underappreciated of late. Like, we know he's great, and he's always been great, but we've been so enamored with Jokic, SGA, and the Luka trade that Giannis has somewhat flown under the radar. A second championship this season would probably be enough for him to challenge and maybe even replace Nikola Jokic as the consensus best player in the NBA today. Now let's move on to the Western Conference, starting with Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. Now I know, the Warriors are only a 7th seed, so some people might not be taking them seriously as potential title winners. But at the very least, I believe they've got a puncher's chance. They've gone 16-6 since acquiring Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Buckets is known as a big game performer in the postseason, so I think they're definitely a team that needs to be taken seriously. If Steph Curry wins the championship with this squad, oh man, several different conversations become very interesting. He'll basically be joining LeBron James and Bill Russell as the only superstars to win championships alongside of 3 different co-stars. In Curry's case, that would be Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Jimmy Butler. Steph is now 37 years old, and people have been trying to declare the end of the Warriors dynasty for a while at this point. But if Steph wins again after the departure of both KD and Klay Thompson, then it will be clear that Steph was the real dynasty all along. The dynasty is alive as long as he's playing. If he wins a 5th championship, it will match him with Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant, and Tim Duncan, while surpassing LeBron James. And that will be really interesting because people will then start to argue about who had the greater career, LeBron or Steph. Right now, the consensus is LeBron, but if the ring count ends up being 5-4 in Steph's favor, and Steph was the guy who revolutionized the game with a 3-point shot, then is it really all that crazy of a comparison? Many people believe that Steph is already a top 10 player of all time, but with another ring at this age in this underdog situation, it would legitimately launch him into the conversation of the top 5. Just as someone who enjoys basketball drama, this would be fun to see happen, because we'd see LeBron and Steph Curry fanboys going at it with a completely new level of intensity. Now let's look at Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves. This kid is still only 23 years old, and he made some serious noise in the NBA playoffs last season, as he famously sunned Kevin Durant and started drawing comparisons to the great Michael Jordan. Eventually, he dropped off as his lack of stamina became a glaring issue in the Western Conference Finals. With that being said, he was young enough that we could easily view that as a learning experience for him. Now the kid is going to have his work cut out for him as he's starting the playoffs up against Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and the Los Angeles Lakers. If Ant-Man somehow manages to not only defeat these Lakers, but leads his Timberwolves to their first championship in franchise history at the young age of 23, then the hype train will be officially insane. Michael Jordan didn't win his first championship until he was 28 years old. And that is a fact that you will hear ESPN bring up over and over again if Edwards wins his first one at 23. Beyond that, it's hard to say what it will do from a legacy standpoint because he'll still have so much of his career ahead of him. But at the very least, you'll see the media embrace him as the new face of the league. Whether or not he will want that distinction will be irrelevant, because the league as a whole is desperate to find the new guy after LeBron retires, and all the momentum will be at his back completely. Next is Kawhi Leonard of the Los Angeles Clippers. If they won the championship, then that would be a wild outcome to say the least. The Clippers were originally viewed as potential title favorites in 2019, but they ended up having some heartbreaking losses in the playoffs. Things ultimately fell through with Paul George, and Kawhi has struggled to remain on the basketball court. He's already one of the most difficult players to rank on the NBA's all-time list because at his best in Toronto, he looked like Michael Jordan at his peak. And in San Antonio, he was a low-scoring, defensively minded role player. And then basically everything outside of that, he struggled to remain on the court. If he suddenly leads the Clippers to the championship and steals the spotlight away from the Lakers on the year they acquired Luka, then it will be one of the most shocking and earth-shaking developments in NBA history. Kawhi will then be ushered into the conversation of the top 20 greatest players of all time, which is crazy because I think people will also see him as a what if. Like imagine what the 3-time champion Kawhi could have been if he was always healthy throughout his career. Alongside of Kawhi, let's look at James Harden. Harden is now 35 years old, and no, he's not the player he once was in Houston, but he's been able to remain effective, and his contribution towards the Clippers' success has gone more positively than a lot of people expected. Right now, he's seen as a player who didn't take the extra steps necessary to win a championship. He's known to love the nightlife, and he's famously quit on teams, he's fell out of shape, and for a while, he was seen as a defensive liability. Honestly, in Harden's case, I don't think it matters as much how he wins the championship. If he leads the team and wins the Finals MVP, then he'll be celebrated and will retroactively apologize for all the years we disrespected his game. But if Kawhi Leonard outplays him and he wins the Finals MVP, then I still think it's a massive boost to Harden's reputation. People will just say that he's matured, learned to play with a team, and got the help he needed. I think it would mean that less people would view Harden harshly, and would instead view him as the all-time great talent that he is, that just had very specific needs in order to succeed. Next is Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. Listen, if Jokic wins this year, then the conversation about him will become wild. He's already collecting MVPs like they're infinity stones, and every season he's breaking statistical records related to efficiency and advanced analytics. This would be his second championship for a franchise that had previously never won a title, and this 2025 title would be right after they just fired their head coach 1 week before the playoffs started. Beyond that, he will have led Russell Westbrook to an NBA championship, who's a guy who's been consistently viewed as a chemistry killer. People are already wanting to say that Jokic is a top 15 player of all time, but his second championship makes him top 10 quality, and some will rush to say that he's the greatest center in NBA history. I certainly don't think he'll unanimously reach that status, but that conversation will heat up for sure. I think it could also set up a future scenario where Nikola Jokic is much more appreciated many years later, in a similar way to Tim Duncan. Like, yeah, we all agree that Jokic is the best in the game today, but no one says he's the face of the league. If Jokic wins again, we may look back on this era and say, while everyone was freaking out about a Luka Doncic trade, while everyone was marveling at a 7'5" player who could dribble, while everyone was focusing on the twilight years of LeBron James and Steph Curry, there was Nikola Jokic, winning multiple rings, breaking records, and hoarding MVP trophies. Now let's look at Luka Doncic. If we're being honest, I think we can admit that this is one of the more complicated situations. Who gets the majority of the credit, and who gets the bigger boost to their legacy? Personally, I think it will be mostly dictated by how they perform in the postseason compared to one another. There's also going to be a decently sized group of people who will never give the Lakers credit for winning the championship this season, because they believe the whole thing was orchestrated by the league the instant the trade went down. So it is what it is for those people. Arguably, Luka winning a championship in Dallas would have meant more, since Dirk Nowitzki is the only other superstar to have championship success in that city. But in LA, Luka would join a long history of Lakers winners, while having arguably the second greatest player in NBA history as your co-star. With that being said, people love Luka Doncic, and I felt that love when I was at his return game in Dallas. Sure, maybe the basketball world isn't rooting for the Lakers, but they're rooting for Luka, a guy who loved and was dedicated to his team, yet was disrespected and called fat as they sent him off. If Luka wins a championship after taking a different team to the NBA Finals in the previous season, then it will go down as one of the more feel-good revenge stories in NBA history, and would immortalize him in the lore of the most famous franchise in the league. Maybe it's not the same kind of legacy he wanted in Dallas, but it's a darn good one nonetheless. Of course, we gotta look at Luka's teammate LeBron James. Assuming health, we're about to see LeBron perform at a level in the playoffs that we've never seen before from a 40-year-old player. From a longevity standpoint, there's not much for James to really do in that aspect. He is already the standard of that criteria. A fifth ring for LeBron James would only strengthen his GOAT argument, as it would match him with Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, and Tim Duncan, while inching one ring closer to Michael Jordan. As far as how much it strengthens his argument, well, I think it really depends on the manner in which he wins. If LeBron doesn't perform well in the NBA Finals, then the narratives will be in place that he was carried by Luka, and his critics will emphasize the fact that LeBron has always had supreme talent throughout his career assisting him. But on the other hand, if LeBron won the title as the Finals MVP while having a 2016 or 2020-like Finals performance, then even his biggest haters will be stunned in silence, as that would theoretically be one of the greatest achievements in NBA history. And honestly, as someone who sees Michael Jordan as the GOAT, I think that would make it a razor-thin race, and I wouldn't have a problem with people seeing it either way if this scenario panned out. As far as the second-seeded Houston Rockets, they really don't have a definitive superstar player just yet. They have an array of young weapons with tremendous chemistry, and unless one of those guys suddenly becomes 2001 Allen Iverson in the playoffs, I don't see any of those dudes having seismic shifts to their legacy. If anything, I think Ime Udoka would reach legendary status as a head coach for taking a team with no definitive superstars to an NBA championship. Lastly, let's take a look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the OKC Thunder. He's 26 years old and is just starting to reach the prime of his career, and I don't care what anyone says, he is easily one of the most skilled players in basketball history. Honestly, of the players on this large list, he might have the most to gain. Sure, modern basketball fans know all about this guy and his gifts, but on a global scale and in pop culture, he's just not yet one of those big names that everyone knows. LeBron, Luka, Kobe, Jordan, Shai. His name just doesn't carry that kind of weight just yet. But it could, and winning an NBA championship with this squad would be the greatest step in that direction. At this same age, Kevin Durant had a chance at winning a championship for Oklahoma City, and even he couldn't get it done. So if SGA does it, he will instantly reach legendary status in that city before he's even reached his 27th birthday. For a while, people wanted to bring him into the conversation with Kobe and Jordan, based on their skills and similarities, but it's always felt premature and usually gets shot down as a result. But if he wins it all with this team while defeating legends like Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James, then his entrance into that comparison will be completely valid, especially when you consider how many elite years he still has ahead of him. So now it's your turn. Whose legacy is most greatly affected with an NBA championship? I look forward to hearing your takes in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.